Life is a great teacher. It just is. And there's so many times, especially when we're talking to some of our students or young adults, that Jake and I both are like, oh, man, part of what we want to say is it's going to be all right. These things happen, and they're hard, and they can be overwhelming, and yet, truly, everything will be all right. And so today, we're going to hear from a couple women who, at different ages, our youngest is 25, and even at 25, there's things that she's learned. And I won't ask Letitia how old she is. So Annie and Letitia will both be sharing here in a minute, and then I'll be wrapping up. But when I was, I don't know, probably 16, I was going all the time. Like, I was involved in drama, and if there was something going on with my friends, like, I wanted to be there. I had major FOMO before FOMO was even a word. I really was afraid of missing out. And I remember one day my dad just said to me, "Why don't you just stay home and read a book?" And what? Who wants to stay home and read a book? Like, that's crazy talk. And that's one thing I've learned, is that actually staying home and reading a book is one of the best days you can have. Like, just a nice day at home, enjoying the haven that God's given you and having quiet time. And so as I've grown, that's one of the things that I've learned, is that it's okay to not be at everything. Like, sometimes the thing you need is just to be by yourself and to enjoy a little quiet and solitude. And so as we share today, some of the things you're like, yeah, I knew that. Some of it you might be like, whoa, that's a big T truth. And I know that God has something for all of you, the men included, wisdom from our older selves to our younger selves. And so, Annie, are you ready to come up and share what you have learned? Yes.
Well, while they help me, thank you guys. I'm Annie, if we have not met. That's my husband, Trevor, over there. This is the first time Michelle or Jake has gotten me to talk in church, so we'll see how this goes. We just closed on our first house on Friday, so thank you, Dawn. She helped us so much. So we're also a little bit frazzled. If you see paint on my hands, that is why. But so, yes, Michelle convinced me to talk last week. I was kind of resistant to allowing a picture of myself at age 12 to be posted, but I did reach out to my parents without a lot of lead time, and they were unable to find anything. Actually, outside of me dressed up for Halloween, and it didn't look at all the way I normally look. So if you want to see that picture, I'll show you afterwards. But I thought I'd just give you a little mental image of who I was around age 12, because that's kind of the age that I'm going to be talking to. So I was very nerdy at the time. I went to this smaller charter school, so wasn't private, wasn't public. I wore a uniform every day. I don't think I owned a single pair of jeans. And the thing that I thought was the coolest was I had these toe shoes, if you remember when those were cool, so your foot could kind of look like a lizard. And I thought it was so cool. I had that. I had my green pom-pom earrings that I got dress coded for, and I was just living my best life. So that was kind of a peak, and it started to go downhill after that. Because at the time I was actually at a place where I was accepted for being that type of person. And pretty quickly after that, that acceptance kind of started to go away. And so that was the time when I really started to seek the Lord a lot more and really make my faith my own. And I was really on fire for God at that point. I was thinking about what I should say, as a word of encouragement or advice. And I was like, oh, actually my 12-year-old self needs to give me some advice, because at the time I was reading my Bible every day. I was leading a Bible study at school. I was sharing my faith. And just honestly, it's probably not something that I've done as well with in the past few years. So I was really convicted by that, just thinking about this, wow, I want to get back into being that consistent with my faith. So anyways, I thought I might actually share a little bit of wisdom from my 12-year-old self. So one of the things that first kind of got me into reading the Bible, learning more about my faith was this book, which, thank you to my mom, I did borrow this from her. It's like a very 90s devotional series that she had in her bookshelf. And this book is a series of excerpts from Amy Carmichael's writings. So she's a Christian missionary who lived in the 1800s into like the early 1950s. And she left from the UK to go to India and evangelize. And then while she was there, she eventually started working with like children that had been sexually exploited in the temple system. So that was really her passion. She was so on fire for the Lord. But then she ended up having a pretty significant injury that caused her to be disabled for a significant part of the end of her life. And she wasn't able to do her ministry anymore. And that's where most of her writings come from. And so even like in that video where it's like talking about everything's going to be all right, like something else that happened to me around the age 12 was like, my family was kind of struggling financially, and I was like, I'm going to get ready for college. I'm going to get ready for my next step. So I looked up the tuition price at my dream school at age 12 and freaked out, like came into the living room crying. I was like, I can never go to college. I need to start babysitting more. And so I think like that was just kind of where I was at. It was like I thought I could control. I thought everything had to be on me, and I think that's where the fear came from, was I thought that in my own power I was going to have to, like, which I mean, I do have my student loans. I have to pay them back. No one else gets to pay them back. But I think I just didn't have a good sense of, like, well, how is God going to provide, and do I need to carry that fear? And so I just was looking back over this devotional to kind of think about, what would I say to myself? What was I thinking about at the time? And at the time, I was really reading this devotional a lot, and I was so on fire for my faith, but obviously, I was still struggling with trusting the Lord and really believing that for myself. And that's something that I still struggle with. I think a lot of us, our struggles, it's like we take a step forward and we take a step back, and there's moments of growth, but there's also a lot of moments of struggle. And it doesn't always go away super easily. So I think in the time since, I've now seen like, okay, yeah, I have student loans, but like God provided, or, you know, it didn't all have to be figured out right away. And so I know that now in a way that I didn't know at age 12, but yet it's still hard to trust sometimes. So I'm just going to read a little passage from one of these writings by Amy Carmichael that I think speaks well to this situation, and that's kind of a reminder to my 12-year-old self, but also a reminder to myself today. So she writes, once when I was climbing at night in a forest before there was a made path, I learned what was meant by the words of Psalm 119:105, which you'll be familiar with. Your word is a lamp to my feet and a light for my path. I had only a lantern, and I had to hold it very low, or I would have slipped on those rough rocks. We don't walk spiritually by electric light, but by a handheld lantern. And a lantern only shows the next step, not several steps ahead. So I think that's just like one of the reasons why I would definitely encourage you to read like from Christians from different eras and things like that, because to me, when I think about, oh, God's the light to my path, like I think like, oh, I'm going to get this big floodlight and I'm going to get to see like 10 years down the path, because that's my reality and my context. But even just reading from someone from a different historical time period, you're reminded like, oh, no, that's not what that necessarily would have meant to everybody. Like, who doesn't have electric light, like a lamp to them means like just this little small pool of light that you can take the one next step ahead. And I think that's often how God leads, is he gives you the one next step. And as you walk with him, you trust that everything is going to be all right, but it's not necessarily going to be all right now or in this lifetime. We're walking towards heaven and eternity with Jesus, but on our path, we're going to have struggle. So the other verse that I wanted to pull out, which is from Philippians 1, is he who began a good work in you will carry it on to completion until the day of Christ Jesus. So that's kind of pulled out of context. That whole chapter is a lot about Paul and Timothy writing to the church of Philippi in their trial and in their struggle. But it's just reminding us that even in our trial, even in our struggle, God's walking with us, and he is going to lead us on to the day of completion, which is ultimately with him. And he's going to take care of you. So that's my word to myself now, and my word to myself when I was 12. And with that, I'll turn it over to Letitia.
Okay. Oh, that was amazing. You did a wonderful job. And I think it's cool how, like, even though we didn't talk about this at all, like, our themes are similar. And so I think that speaks, volumes to how the Lord moves in each person individually. I'll probably look at my paper a lot more because I tend to go rogue. And when I go rogue, weird things come out of my mouth. All of my family can attest to that, and my friends. So, okay. So, when asked to speak today, Pastor Michele said that the theme was, what would you tell your younger self? And to share, I'm 37 and 2/3, you said? Yep, 37 and 2/3. It matters when you are this age, like the little bits. So that's how old I am. So immediately when I think of my younger self, I go back to middle school and high school. It's just the first thing that comes to mind. I don't know why, because I am 37. But truly, that this could also be my college years, my 20s as well, because, like I said, I'm a middle-aged woman now. So as to not focus on one particular era of my younger self, I decided to focus on what I would tell myself anytime up to now, just reflecting on my life a little bit, not too much, because there was, counseling would be involved with that. So just a little bit. And the theme that kept coming to mind was that this is your story, trust the one who is writing it. And I had a picture, maybe? I had a slide. Oh yeah, there's me, lots of me. It's mostly 0 through graduation, and then I threw in me and Josh in a maternity photo. So that's my life till now, apparently. I was in the Miss Unalaska pageant. That's what that is down there. I placed 3rd. So, sorry. See, this is not written. Okay. Sorry, rogue. Okay. So yeah, trust. This is your story. Trust the one who is writing it. It's so powerful to think and reflect on God as the author of our lives. Like that. That thought to me is just mind blowing. And I don't know about you, but I just love chick flicks, like a lot. I know some of the guys might not love them, but my brother-in-law Charles loves chick flicks, and we watch Hallmark together when we're in Ohio, so that's fun. That's pretty much all I watch, and it's not just the mainstream chick flicks anymore, like Sweet Home Alabama, The Wedding Planner, those are my favorites, but it's also the cheesy, what acting school did you go to kind of flicks now have entered my life, and I love them. They're so predictable, and there's hardly any real conflicts or trials, and for me, that's just blissful, and in a hurting world, it just transports me to a place where nothing can hurt, and everything works out. All the love, all the babies, it's just wonderful. But as we all know, that's not reality, right? He doesn't promise us a life free of pain and trials, but in Deuteronomy 31:8, he does tell us that he will never leave us or forsake us, which is so comforting, and it's a promise that I hold on to when I think of his promises to us. I would tell my younger self that even though some things can be incredibly painful, in the end is not laid out perfectly to see, and know that it will be okay. He will always be there every step of the way. I intended initially to talk about my self-confidence issues up through college and to give myself permission to patiently wait for my husband and all of those things for the young ladies in the room. But what kept coming to mind was our journey to become parents and my journey to become a mother, because I hope that will encourage someone someday. And so this is kind of what I was just reflecting on. And so I won't go into any details because it's Mother's Day. And although there's pain involved with Mother's Day, it's also a day of joy. But friends, that journey has never been like one I thought it would be. It's not like a movie or a chick flick. When the baby comes out, there's no walking around immediately afterwards, all gussied up and ready to do all the motherly things. I will say, though, that my sister kind of accomplished that, and I was like, how are you doing this? And now she has 2 babies, and I'm like, you're just like a rock star. So if that's your story, yay, that's amazing. And for you, I prayed that, so thank you, Jesus. I wish I could go back and tell my younger self to put my complete trust in him, the one who was and is writing my story. It doesn't mean the process would have been any less painful, but perhaps there would have been more hope and joy in the waiting, in the trials. There's a song that I just really love by Casting Crowns called Already There. And my favorite line in that song is in the bridge, and it says, "One day I'll stand before you and look back on the life I've lived. I can't wait to enjoy the view and see how all the pieces fit." And it just gets me every time. Sometimes I use that phrase from that song to encourage friends who are going through something challenging, because it's true. That's something I can't wait to see too. Have I mastered the trusting thing? No. I don't think that happens until we get to heaven and we know, we see and can walk with Jesus. But with age comes wisdom and life lived. And having gone through our trials with loss, conceiving, difficulty birth, the inability to have more children, and now being in incredible physical pain all the time, I can see his embrace in guiding through every step of the way. And in every difficult appointment with crushing news, he held me up. And it was only by his strength that I continued to breathe and move forward. And stepping back on this side, I'm able to see that more now. So I wish that I could tell my younger self or whatnot that he's with you. And I feel like family and friends did tell me that. And so it's important to surround yourself with people who will remind you of that. I'm so glad that we're starting to see the other side of that story and still trusting and believing in miracles for our life and for my body. But we have a little daughter who is amazing and sassy and puts on bright red lipstick for Mother's Day that goes all over her face. And but he is faithful to provide, no matter what that is, when that is, or how he does it, even when it doesn't go like you expected it to go. So really and truly, he's got you. He's got me. He's faithful. And this is your story, so trust the one who's writing it.
Oh, those were powerful messages, weren't they? And so encouraging. Thank you, Annie and Letitia. Thank you for sharing. And I've just got a little bit to share before we end here. So this is kind of a neat thing, right? Thinking about what we would say to our younger selves. And I wonder for you, what would you say to your younger self? I encourage you to think about that. And it actually gives you this really beautiful opportunity just to look at what God has done and give thanks. And in our Bible, we actually have a book that basically is doing this. It's the book of Ecclesiastes. And many believe that it was King Solomon. In the book, he only refers to himself as teacher. But basically, it's a message to his younger self and what life has taught him and what he's learned. And if it is indeed Solomon, he's known as one of the wisest men to ever live. And so I encourage all of you to take a look at the book of Ecclesiastes. Jake and I have had conversations about this. He thinks the book is pretty depressing. And there's a reason why. Like, I think the second verse in the book, it says, "Meaningless, meaningless," says the teacher, "utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless." Well, that's pretty depressing. It's all meaningless. But there's so much more to the book. Yes, there are some hard realities, and those are actually up on the screen. So we don't have time to go through each one of these, but I'm just going to give you some bullet points here of what the writer of this message to his younger self says about hard realities. The smarter you get, the harder it is to cope with the world. That's true. Pleasures and riches do not make you happy. Wise men and fools die alike. You can't take the results of your hard work with you when you die. You can't take your wealth. And the results of your labor don't really satisfy your desires either. Obedience does not guarantee that everything will be happy and go well. These are depressing. You guys are like, thanks, Pastor Michele. We're going to leave encouraged. And the wicked sometimes get away with it. On our Tuesday night studies, we've talked about this a little bit. Why do the bad guys win sometimes? And we see that, and it's discouraging. Those are hard realities. And even some of the things Annie and Letitia mentioned have been hard realities for their life. But this message from our friend Solomon also has some big T truths, some encouragement. And actually, it's pretty simple. The truth: eat, drink, and enjoy life because you can trust God. Work hard and be smart. Okay, I'll do that. Don't be stupid, okay? That's a direct quote. That's a little paraphrasing. Take chances, pursue opportunities, and enjoy life while you can. And as you live, remember whose image you are made in. I can do that. I can do that. I think sometimes the burden we put on each other for our life and what it looks like is so heavy when it comes to accomplishing and how much we have in the bank account and our report card and all that. And yet here is one of the wisest men to ever live. And this is what he breaks it down to. Eat, drink, and enjoy life because you can trust God. And as we've gotten closer to Mother's Day, many of you know my mom passed away several years ago. And as we get close to this holiday every year, I go back and I look at things she wrote me or pictures. And as we were preparing for this message, I went back and looked at some of her letters to me. And, you know, social media, we get sick of it and Messenger and all that, but you know what? I love that I have access to all these messages that her and I sent to each other just on a normal day. And so there was a day that's just the hard reality of my life. One of the things that we had faced together as a family was hitting me again. And it wasn't even something that we were like dealing with in the moment, but just I was getting bogged down. Because just life is hard sometimes, and it's easy to get discouraged. And so my mom, she wrote me this letter, and I'm just going to share a little bit of it. And this is from Barbara Kay, we like calling her. And she said this: Michele, the thing I have learned to do is let it go. It happened to us. We lived every minute. We can't go back to life before it happened, but we cannot let it control our future or live in fear of the future. God is faithful, and he loves us so much, so I choose to put my trust in him. The things in the past that have hurt me do not define who I am. He does. Only he does. I love you, Michele. Do not let the past get you down. And remember, he is faithful in all things. And I remember reading this for the first time, and it was a reset. I was like, okay, I've learned these things as well, Mother. Thank you for that reminder. And so when it comes down to it, if I was going to summarize even what our friend King Solomon shares in Ecclesiastes, and even the words of my own mother to me, it's this: be patient and enjoy life as God gives it. Be patient and enjoy life as God gives it. There is a time for everything. And in Ecclesiastes again, he says, there is a time for everything and a season for every activity under the sun. And for you, there is going to be seasons of good and bad. But like both Letitia and Annie shared, God is with us. And that quote, everything's going to be fine, everything's going to be all right, it sounds kind of cliche, right? But the fact is that the Bible says that eternity has been set in our hearts. And so this idea that everything will be all right is not just something to say, it's something to believe in, because we are working towards a reward in a place that we cannot yet see. But God has said it's placed in our hearts. And so the fact that we long for a time that looks like a chick flick, that just means that we're longing for that place that we were always designed for. And it's something that we can hold on to on the good days and the bad days. Kenzie and Esther, why don't you come up? I think the last song we're singing is Goodness of God. This has just been an anthem for our church for many years. I think we sang this our first service.
I think so.
And it's true. Even in this little family, we've seen the goodness of God. And as you sing this today, remember his goodness to you. It's easy to forget. It's easy to be thinking about those things that you don't quite see answers yet to. But like that lamp, he's given you the next step. And so today as we sing this, and I'm going to ask you all to stand, let's just sing to him and say thank you.